world is full of twisted people, and when they have their eye on you, things can get unpleasant. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Number 1. I grew up on an island in Alaska and lived on the same property since birth to high school graduation. Our house had 2 stories, and the downstairs had a bathroom, furnace room, storage room, entryway, and rec room. One of the walls had some plywood pieces up, so that we could feed extension cords through it to our crawl space. We had a C-shaped driveway that you could enter from one side, and then park in the carport and then just drive towards the exit. The crawl space consisted of 2 big water tanks, because we caught our own rainwater. We also used this area for storage. The space was 10 by 15, but only 3 feet high. You had to lift a cover up to get into the water tanks, and you could only enter the crawl space from the side of the house. It was a 2 by 2 door, that we kept a master lock on but never actually locked. Our dog Brewster had an area to the side of the house as well. He had a big fenced area, his own stairway and porch, which was half covered, and he had a doghouse. During the summer, we had black bears in our yard most nights, and Brewster would give a quick bark to let them on their way. We knew his barks. There were 4 of us in the family, my parents, myself, and my older brother, who is 2 years older and has Down syndrome. My brother was in special education at school, and there were other kids who would come into the same room, but just once in a while throughout the day, because they had similar disabilities and were able to keep up some of their general classes. But some of the kids had discipline problems or mental illness. My brother was loved by the school kids, and everyone knew him. One day, a native kid that was about 15 came to our door and wanted to play with Travis. We thought it was odd, because Travis had moderate Downs, and he didn't really like playing with other kids. He liked watching kids play. Travis liked watching movies and listening to music. My mum asked the kid what his name was, and he said he was Mark, and he knew Travis from junior high the year prior, because he would go into Travis's class sometimes for help with his homework. I remember him staring at me a little too much, and he didn't seem like someone who was mentally challenged. My mother let him come in but kept a watchful eye on them. Travis seemed like he didn't want him there, and my mum told Mark that we were having dinner soon and told him it was time for him to go. My mum found out that he had moved into the area where we lived, but it was still a little away. He had been in and out of foster care for most of his life. His parents were abusive addicts. I think he came over another time and my mum felt bad for him, and she really felt as if something was off. She felt like he was coming over because of me. My mum politely told him that Travis didn't really like having visitors, and he seemed okay with that, and never came over again. My parents went to a church service on Wednesday evenings, and would be gone a couple of hours. I would stay home with Travis. At the time I was 11 and he was 13. I started helping out the church nursery when I was 9, and when I turned 11, my best friend and I took a babysitting course, which included CPR and first aid. We would babysit together, and at age 12 started babysitting on our own. My mum was a homemaker, and would always be home except for Wednesday's church service. My parents didn't drink, didn't do drugs nor smoke, and I can only remember my parents going out a few times when we were in need of a babysitter. I would leave the downstairs door unlocked for my parents when they were going to be gone only a couple of hours. I was expecting them home in half an hour, and was surprised when I heard the downstairs door open. I thought I must not have heard the car pull up, and Travis was up past his bedtime, so I quietly tell Travis to go to his bedroom and get to bed. I start walking through the kitchen to the top of the stairs, and I call out, "Mom? Dad?" And I hear the footsteps stop. And I'm looking down the stairs, and I can see men's work boots and jeans. This is not my parents. The way the stairs are set up, you could see the bottom half of someone without descending the stairs. I'm scared to death, and I run to Travis, who is going down the hall, and I grab him and drag him to my parents' bedroom, because it's the only room that locks and has a phone. Now, I don't mean this in a rude way, but down kids can be very stubborn, so my brother just wants to go to his room. But I get him to sit down on the bed, and I'm trying to keep him in the room whilst I'm grabbing a gun, and I call my neighbour. I can hear him walking around downstairs still. My neighbour answers her phone immediately, and I whisper to her that someone is in the house and that I'm scared. She told me to come out onto the front porch and she'll be there. I get the courage to run down the door, and I get outside. Thankfully she's in our driveway, and she has her hound dog with her. She lets me know that she's going to enter the house through the downstairs. She disappears from sight, but comes back quickly and tells me that the door is locked, so she makes her way upstairs. She gets to the top when we hear the downstairs door open and the crunching of gravel as the intruder runs off. She lets go of her dog, and the dog chases the person into the woods. The dog came back 10 minutes later, and our neighbour sat with us until my parents got home. The police were never called, because I think my parents assumed it was a neighbour's boy screwing with me. We live in a safe place, where the only thing you have to worry about are bears and an occasional wolf. A week after this incident, our dog would bark for 15 minutes after we went to bed consistently every night. We would look out the windows and saw nothing. We figured it was bears because it was springtime and Brewster's was probably just getting used to them again. A couple of months the barking still happened. I had my best friend stay the night, and we would always stay in the downstairs so that we can be louder and stay up as late as we'd like. Kate had a brother that was 7 years older, and we'd ask him to bring us booze. All the kids were starting their vices at our age. It was a little after midnight, and her brother never showed up, and Brewster never barked that night either. We were sitting on the stairs braiding each other's hair, when we both got a feeling as if someone were looking at us. We looked over, and there was a guy staring into the window. We ran upstairs in panic. We thought perhaps it was her brother, but he wouldn't have come to the window and spy on us. The face also seemed a bit darker than his, but we had the lights on downstairs, and there were no lights by that window outside, so it was hard to tell who it was. We didn't want to wake my parents up just in case it was her brother, so we waited 30 minutes and went back down to grab our stuff and went to sleep in my bedroom for the night. The next day we spoke to her brother, and he said it wasn't him. That night, Brewster's was back to barking again. 2 more months go by, and I had gone to bed and heard Brewster's bark, and I looked out my window and as usual didn't see anything. I had just dozed off again, and woke up to Brewster's barking frantically. I looked out my window, and I see a guy running out of our driveway. I thought about waking my parents, but we had a trail on the side of our house that kids used to use to run to the road behind ours. The neighborhood was on the side of a mountain, so all the kids used trails to get straight through to another road instead of using the main roads. I'd never seen someone come out of that part of the driveway, because the trail was on the south side of the house, along with the crawl space and Brewster's area. My room was the only room on the north side. I decided to go back to sleep and was tossing and turning. 15 minutes go by, and I smell smoke. I go to the hall and the smell is a lot stronger, and it's starting to get hazy in Travis's room, which was directly across from mine. I scream, "Fire! Fire! Wake up!" My parents are up, but Travis doesn't want to get out of bed. But thank God for the strength of adrenaline. We get outside and the flames were pouring out of the crawl space. We get Brewster out of his enclosure, and the neighbors all come out to help us. The firemen were there rather quickly, but the fire had destroyed the crawl space, and my parents' and Travis's rooms because they were directly over it. The firemen got the fire out, thankfully, and nobody was physically hurt. This was one of the scariest nights of my life, though. I always remember the fire chief kneeling down to speak to me after he'd spoken to my parents, and he said, "Hey, Melinda, we believe it was arson." I looked at him with tears streaming down my face, and I say in anger, "Who is arson?" Everyone started laughing so hard, and I'm thinking, how is it funny? That damn arson could have killed our family. So he explains what arson is. I'm still actually friends with the old fire chief's son, and I share that story with him often, because his father passed away from cancer when we were teens. His father is the only happy memory I have from that horrific night. The island I grew up on had a city and a village out south. We lived out south, but before the village. We had firemen for the south, north, and the city. We had state troopers for the island, and the city cops in the city limits. My mum took my brother and I to our family friend's house, and my dad dealt with the fire officials, and a state trooper showed up later. After the investigation, my family, neighbours, and firemen pieced together that a person had been living in our crawl space for at least 4 months. We knew he set the house on fire on purpose. He used a box of matches. My mum said the first odd thing she noticed was that at night she smelled sulphur. We also knew who did it. It was Mark. His uncle was one of the first firemen who showed up at our house, and saw him standing near our driveway watching. My mum had told him my description of what the person was wearing, that I saw fleeing from our house, and it was what he was wearing. Behind our house near the crawl space area, my dad found out where he hung out when he wasn't at the crawl space. There was a bunch of cigarette butts, soda cans, which were all found near there. But because our crawl space wasn't locked, our insurance company wouldn't have paid for the repairs. Because of our water tanks, the space was supposed to be locked. So my parents never said anything to the police, and the firemen never said anything. By pursuing this, we could have not had a home, a house my father had built. It took 4 months for our house to be repaired, and it smelt like ozone even years later. What bothers me the most is knowing that he had seen me and my friends undressed numerous times whilst changing in the rec room during tons of sleepovers. Where he had set up shop was right next to the plywood with the holes drilled through. He listened to all our secrets. I never explained to my friends that he'd seen us and heard us during our sleepovers, because I didn't want them to feel sick to their stomachs like I did. I still have issues when it comes to being home alone. I can't sleep if I'm the only adult in the house. I keep the volume on everything very low, and I'm scared to shower. I like to be able to see the front door, and I have night terrors to this day. I'm 34 now, and I've been dealing with the anxiety since the fire and panic attacks since I was 18. Just recently, I was diagnosed with PTSD. When the intruder was in his early 20s, he was caught for burning down a house and was put in jail. All of my childhood toys were stored in the crawl space, along with a lot of our family's sentimental possessions. But ultimately, I lost a hell of a lot more than just some possessions that night. Number 2. When I was a younger woman, I moved, all alone, to Atlanta for an internship. I was dirt poor, so I took public transit everywhere I went. I encountered plenty of creeps on the train. but was always able to get them to back off or sneakily escape into the crowd. On my last day, I took the train to the airport. A very large man approached me in a familiar style. He was both much taller and broader than I, casually dressed, maybe even cheaply. I followed my usual protocols, not smiling and not saying anything, holding on tight to all possessions, and being ready to bolt if necessary. I don't think he asked for me to do anything. His interests weren't explicitly sexual or flirtatious. He just talked to me intermittently, with cool confidence, of someone who thinks you're not going anywhere. I wasn't too worried, but I didn't have the usual luxury of sneaking away and catching the next train. I had to be at the airport. I got off the train. He got off the train. There was no subterfuge about this. No, "Oh, I'm going to the airport too." At this point he was deliberately, explicitly walking with me. Still not flirting. Still not asking for anything. Not my number, not anything. He got on the escalators with me. He closed his hands over mine, on my rolling suitcase handle, and I kept my grip tight on the handle, thinking, what the hell? Is he going to try and steal it? I should have yanked it away from him, but I was so surprised and scared by the weird, inexplicable move in the now familiar game of cat and mouse that I didn't react at all. I just held on tight, hoping, praying that I was strong enough to keep my own. There were enough people around it that I could make a scene if I wanted to. Looking back, not reacting to this was really stupid. But I was young and completely out of sorts. It would have been easy under the circumstances to say, "Hey, get your dirty hands off my suitcase." But I wasn't raised to be reactive or combative like that. This wasn't part of my instinct repertoire. He started looking around as if he were trying to formulate a plan, and at this point I was afraid. I don't exactly remember what happened next. It's like he just changed his mind and walked away. I made my flight to Atlanta and left. But what the hell was on his mind going through the whole encounter? Why follow someone so far for no reason? Why make that specific grab? What the hell was that? It wasn't the only time I've had a stranger act as if they know me. But this guy didn't seem deranged or even slightly off. It was the weirdest thing. Number 3. I paid a visit to a local nightclub called the Happy Red Onion, taking part in the Wednesday social club party. The restaurant is divided in 2 parts, the bar and the disco. At one point, I went to the disco side of the restaurant. I ordered just a huge pint of ice water, and then a random guy approached me, asking me if I could buy him a pint of beer. With all the politeness imaginable, I told him that unfortunately it wouldn't be possible. In all honesty, I don't see why I should buy a random guy a beer at all. And would you guess what happened next? The man started spontaneously accusing me of harassing women and underage girls trying to get attention. He then suggested that everyone present at the restaurant would have known it too. However, he claimed that if I'd bought him a beer, he would have just left me alone. He even invited me to join him and some friends on their table. I didn't understand. His behavior enlarged into such measures that I had to turn to the bartender in order to get some help. Only rarely in my life had I felt so threatened, and such fear from such an individual. The bartender instructed me to go to one of the sides of the bar, and the bully to go to the other. I don't understand how he could be accusing me of harassing underage girls, since they couldn't even get into any nightclubs here in Finland. After that, I sat down on my table on my side of the bar. The guy still approached me, asking me why I was there. He then began accusing me of being a predator to young girls. The bartender noticed, came along, and in a loud voice ordered the guy to go outside, or he would be evicted. From that moment onwards, the evening was fine. But apparently 15 minutes before closing, there was a fight between some people outside. I'm unsure if he was involved. Maybe he just wanted a brawl. But either way, that physical confrontation was unpleasant, and I'm still a little bit in shock. Number 4. I am a 25-year-old woman living in Canada, and my 12-year-old half-brother Jake lives in Texas with my father. Long story short, my dad had a child with another woman. Unfortunately, he is an extremely immature parent. He tries to control Jake's contact by limiting between me and my other siblings. Won't go into too much detail, but luckily, we've both found ways to keep in touch. So I'm just chilling, browsing on my phone, and I get a message from Jake on Hangouts. I didn't really want to talk to him at the moment, because he was being rude earlier, but then he tells me that he's scared. Jake isn't very easily scared. He's kind of an intense and mischievous kid, so when he told me that, I was concerned, and asked him what's up. He tells me there is someone that's been knocking on the door for a while. Mind you, it's 10:30 p.m. on a Monday night. Then I ask him where our dad is, and he said that he pissed off to a bar down the road. I ask him for more details, and he said the guy's pounding on the door and yelling who's in there. I tell him to stay away from the door. He needs to get to a phone and call the police ASAP. He then tells me that they don't even have a landline, and he doesn't have a cell. Cool. I guess my dad has Hangouts too though, because Jake was able to reach him and my dad apparently called the police from the bar, and he said he'd be there shortly. I told Jake I'd stay with him over Hangouts until someone arrived, and he said he was still scared because this dark figure was walking around the front door and pounding on it. He even said that someone drove by and the guy stopped, but continued after whoever drove by. This sent shivers down my spine, as this person knew what they were doing and probably had sinister intentions. I continued to talk to him. My uncle, who lives down the street from them, did come over, and the cops eventually did too. Jake says once my uncle pulled up, the knocking ceased entirely, but my dad was still not present by the time they all arrived. There wasn't much I could do besides read how scared he was, and this made me all the more angry with my father for leaving a 12-year-old home alone at this hour with a sick guy who clearly must have known someone was home. Nothing ever came of it and he was never found. But whoever this twisted guy was, let's never meet again. For your sake. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Huge thank you to all the amazing patrons on screen this month, who've really helped with the support for the channel. It is tremendously appreciated. Also, the designs for merch will be revealed to you all soon. I know I keep saying that, but I just want to offer you the best quality stuff and not disappoint you. Thank you for all your patience. Remember that if you want to share your story, you just need to submit it as a text post on my Reddit page or send it to me via email. Both links can be found in the description. And if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to not miss your daily dose of horror. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.